So, very good evening to all of you. I, Dr. Krishna Sinhamahapatra, welcome you to the sixth lesson or sixth lecture on the topic non-fiction, which is there for your UGC NET set examination in English. I will take 2 minutes of yours before I share my screen. Till that time, I would like to just have a discussion as to what is non-fiction and how this discussion is going to help you and which are the areas which you need to focus on while preparing for this paper. So as the term non-fiction clearly states, it is about the texts which are not primarily categorized as fiction. Fiction kind of appeals to our imagination and we are more into reading fiction, studying fiction. However, non-fiction plays an important role in developing the knowledge base of any topic we take up as such. And hence, whenever you're preparing for non-fiction, I would refer to the lecture series on the topic literary theory and literary or the criticism, which is already there in the BARTI lectures database, which you can refer to refer and understand the various aspects of non-fiction. Just a minute. So as I'm sharing the screen, please bear with me. It will take you 2 minutes more and we'll be back. So today we will take up John Stuart Mill for discussion. So all those of you who are online, I would request all of you to gather your thoughts on the topic of John Stuart Mill and the inception of the idea of nonfiction. How did the idea of nonfiction start? What are your ideas regarding it? As I am sharing the screen, so it will take me around 2 minutes or 1 minute, and I will be joining through my laptop. As of now, I've just joined through my mobile because there is some connectivity problem there. So I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully, I'm audible. Yes. So, as we have already started with the discussion, I don't think we would need to focus on this slide anymore. However, all of you must be aware that this is a session organized by BARTI, and here are my details. And we are discussing non-fictional prose, and this is the sixth lecture, as I said. And I have already asked you to think about the origin of the term non-fiction, how we discussed it, and how we are going to discuss about John Stuart Mill today. So, non-fiction works. And before we go into the inception of the idea, I have just put before you certain points and writers whom you can refer to while discussing non-fiction prose. So, if we talk about the age of revival, you can refer to Erasmus, Thomas More, William Tyndale, then Richard Tottle, Thomas Thomas Wyatt, Henry Howard. Then we have got Roger Ascham, Thomas Eliot, Thomas Mallory, William Dunbar. So as you prepare for your NETSET examination, please prepare the essays or prose works which these writers have done and see what kind of contribution they have in developing the field of nonfiction during the age of revival. Then comes the Elizabethan age. So in the Elizabethan age, we have Francis Bacon, Richard Hooker, Walter Raleigh, Richard Hakluyt, Samuel Purkis, John Fox, William Camden, John Knox. For Restoration age, we have Dryden, Butler, John Evelyn, Samuel Pepys. So if you remember, we have discussed about Pepys's diary and how diary writing is included in the field of non-fictional prose and how it is important to understand that as well. Then we have Jeremy Collier, William Dampier, John Wilmot, Thomas Rhymer. Now we talk about Enlightenment age, and it is 1700 to 1800. It was Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, Richard Steele, Addison, that is Joseph Addison, and Samuel Johnson, who have contributed significantly during this age. Then the essayists of the Victorian age, wherein we have Thomas Babington Macaulay, Thomas Carlyle, John Ruskin, Matthew Arnold, J.H. Newman, Walter Pater, Oscar Wilde. So, what we did is that I just shared with you a few important writers and important prose writers whose work you need to refer to when you are preparing for your NETSET examination. However, other than that, we have already shared. Yes, I can see Prashik as wishing good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon. I hope the visual clarity is there now because earlier I was not able to share the screen, so you perhaps couldn't see it. Now we discussed the important writers of certain ages, like we were discussing about Victorian age. Other than that, yesterday we were discussing about Maya Angelou. We discussed about other writers who belong to the modern age. and how essay writing, essays, and important non-fiction played an important role in each and every age. We have kind of discussed about it. Now, as I was saying, that first we will discuss the early years of prose and how in this non-fiction took its birth. So, Anglo-Saxon prose, much of which is contemporaneous with the heroic poetry, is generally derivative and Latin in spirit, repeating and adapting ideas that are far removed from simplicity. The work for which prose was needed, first of all, was mainly that of instruction. And it is so true that any government which had to kind of pass on its information, any instruction to it, the people around them, there had to be some kind of prose, there had to be some kind of instruction which had to be framed. And of the early didactic prose, a great part in translation or adaptation. From the time of Ulfilas to the time of Wycliffe and the time of Caxton's, and since there has been case a ceaseless activity of the workers who have had to carry into and to break up and make portable and useful the great mass left by the older civilizations from the Goths and their successor to do their best with. The purpose for which prose was needed first of all was mainly for instruction. And of the early didactic prose, a great part is in translation and adaptation. The early English literature is strong in translations, and translations were the books most necessary for people who wanted to know about things and who knew that the most important questions had already been answered by the Latin authors, so that it was waste of time for English or other simple folk to try to find out things for themselves. So there is a huge body of work in translation, and it's not only that it was happening in the early phase of English literature, but even now we see that translations are on the go. If we have autobiographies of writers in their own mother tongue, then slowly we'd rather get it translated so that we can approach that and understand that. Now, the 15th century. The 15th century is comparatively barren and non-productive in the field of English literature. During this time, little poetry of quality is written, and the prose literature of this age recorded considerable progress. Unlike the poetry of this age, the prose suffered from no retrogression. And one of the prime examples of that is Reginald Peacock. So, he is one of the most important prose writers of the 15th century. Peacock's prose, often rugged and obscure, is marked by his preference for English words over Latin. His two works were The Represser of Overmuch Blaming of the Clergy and The Book of Faith. So his books were among the earliest of English controversial works, and they mark a victory over the once all important Latin. Then comes the reference of Caxton, and Caxton is majorly known as the English printer, and he was also a remarkable prose writer of the 15th century. It would be difficult to overestimate the debt of Caxton to English literature. He printed almost every English work of real quality known in his days, including Chaucer and Malory. So he printed almost every English work of real quality known in his day, including Chaucer and Malory. So in addition, Caxton made and printed 24 translations from French, Dutch, and Latin texts, of which the most remarkable were the two earliest, that is, the Requiem of the Histories of Troy and the Game and Play of Chess. So these are important contributions. Then comes a reference of John Fisher. So John Fisher, a religious divine and the Bishop of Rochester, opposed Henry VIII during Reformation, was imprisoned and finally beheaded. He wrote much in Latin and in English, and he is represented by a small collection of tracts and sermons and a longer treatise on the Psalms. So, though they are of no great quantity, his prose works are in the nature of much importance. So, they were the first of the rhetorical religious books that for several centuries were to be an outstanding feature of English prose. So, Fisher, a religious divine and the Bishop of Rochester, was imprisoned and finally beheaded. However, before that, he wrote much in Latin and in English, and he is represented by a small collection of tracts and sermons and a longer treatise on the Psalms. Then we come to the Elizabethan age. So when we talk about the Elizabethan age was also referred to as the young age, for it was full of vigor, intellectual earnestness, and soaring imagination. These elements were quite apparent in the poetry of the age, but when it came to breaking the confinements, it was prose that ran amok. However, remarkable development of prose did take place, which was variously written with great stylistic and linguistic excellence. So, remarkable development of prose did take place, which was variously written with great stylistic and linguistic excellence. Now, during the 15th century, Latin was the medium of expression, and almost all the important prose works were written in that language. It was in the 16th century that English language took form. So, this is when it started taking form. The early Renaissance, the period saw production of prose that majorly consisted of translations. So, the writers of this period were educationists and reformers rather than creative writers. And this is very important. When we are saying somebody is an educationist, number one, point number one to be noted. Educationist means you are framing policies related to education. You are framing policies for the betterment of education in the upcoming years. And when you are doing it, you are basically kind of thinking of doing it for what? For the people, to spread awareness regarding education, to bring about some kind of reformation. They were not creative writers, and this is what makes it a very, very important source of study of nonfiction. And as we are discussing every age and how the nonfiction prose was very much an active part of its development, that is how you need to prepare for your net set examination. Take up each age which you are discussing, and as you are reading and discussing and preparing yourself for that particular age, right from the age of revival, Elizabethan age, or the early Renaissance age, you have to keep your own, no, in your own brain you have to have or chalk out this diagram as to who were the eminent writers, what were their contributions in the different fields of study, and how each one of them was kind of crucial. Now, when we are talking about poem, you have to think of the poets of that age. When you are thinking about the novelists, you have to think about the novelists of that particular age. So, this is how whatever is there in that particular age, you have to actually do what? You have to actually create a flow chart of the writers. You will have to create a kind of diagram of the writers and the contribution which they have. When you are creating that, you have to, for example, you are making a column. If you are writing the age, name of the age here, so write the name of the age here, and then make columns as to the prose writers. Then you can write about the novelists, you can write about the prose writers, and the poetry here, poems, and then the dramatists, the drama which was there. When you are taking up prose writers, under the prose also there can be two kinds of prose. One which is a product of creativity. So prose will again go down into two forms, which wherein one will be about the creative writers, and when there is only imagination and creativity, no proper information, it will come under your fictional, short fiction, or short prose under fiction. But you will have to actually, when you are preparing non-fiction, you will have to focus here, wherein the prose writers of that particular age who have said about or spoken about different aspects of the age, different areas of the age, different things about the age, related to a particular field of study. So, this is what you have to keep in mind. So, just a minute. Yes. So as we were discussing, so each age you need to take up and you need to know it just like a picture as to who were the poets, what were the important poems which they have written, what kind of poems they were writing, what kind of poem was in kind of used during that age. So how can you contribute to that? And then, as I was saying, specifically talking about non-fiction, you will have to see the kind of non-fictional work which was there during that age. So if we talk about the early Renaissance period, then Sir Thomas More is an important writer. And since this is lecture 6, till lecture 6, what we have done is that we have actually discussed in details the important writers who are already there, and we have already discussed. Other than that, what today we are trying to do is I'm trying to show you the graph which you have to develop, a kind of graph which you have to develop in order to have a very sound knowledge about each age, prepare yourself thoroughly for your net set examination. And as you are doing it, you will have this mind map before you. So, for each age, create a mind map wherein you are going to write the topic. And then, if we are talking about non-fiction, who were the writers, what were their contribution, names of the books, names of the characters, year in which it was published, the important learning thing from the it, and then, sometimes when you publish a work, there is some other work which kind of comes up as a reaction to it. So, what is it that has come up as a reaction to it? So, all these things you will have to actually read and understand and develop your study about. So, as we are discussing about this particular age, which is the early Renaissance, this is just an example for you to understand how you should go about with your study. So Thomas More eulogizes democratic communism, people state, elected government, equal distribution of wealth, 9 hours work a day, and what is very important is liberty, equality, and fraternity, which is the important area of what? Important area of democracy. So his famous work is Utopia. As I was saying, do you have any idea about Utopia? Any one of you who I see online? What do we mean by Utopia? So the concept of utopia is an imaginary land. However, there certain rights are there, right? So it is regarded as the true prologue of Renaissance and has been referred to as the first monument of modern socialism. So he eulogizes democratic communism and people's state elected government, equal distribution of wealth, and 9 hours work a day. Now we come to John Stuart Mill and his description. Further, when we are discussing his influence, the shape of 19th century British thought and political discourse. So, his substantial corpus of works includes texts in logic, epistemology, economics, social and political philosophy, ethics, metaphysics, religion, and current affairs. So, among his most well known and significant works are A System of Logic, Principles of Political Economy, on Liberty, kind of idea of utilitarianism, and the subjection of women, three essays on religion, and his autobiography. As at the very beginning, I said that we will be discussing John Stuart Mill in details today. Now, as you understand and you listen to him or listen about him today, you have to remember that John Stuart Mill, his contribution is not only significant when we are studying it as a non-fictional prose, but it is also important because it is a kind of it is so because, as I said, that he has given strong views. He has shared strong views about women empowerment, about, or rather, laid the foundation of this concept of feminism in or through his work. That is why his works are very, very important. And today, in the last lecture, I will be discussing about John Stuart Mill. And as I said, these discussions are just examples as to how you are going to take up each age and the contribution of the different writers in that age, and how you are going to talk about them. So, John Stuart Mill profoundly influenced the shape of 19th century British thought and political discourse. His substantial corpus of works, as I said, includes all these things: logic, epistemology, economics, social and political philosophy, ethics, metaphysics, religion, and current affairs. And some of the significant works, their name is there before you. Hopefully, the slides are visible now. Just a minute, I will just try and see if it can be visible. So, just a minute. Trying to see if the screen becomes is better visible to you. Yes, I'm sharing my screen once again. So, as we were discussing, and these are the writers, the names which you need to prepare and you need to be ready with them, and their writings: early prose, 15th century, Elizabethan age, Caxton. So, we were discussing on this page. So, none of Mill's major writings remain independent of his moral, political, and social agenda. It so happens that if you are talking about nonfiction, it is about your belief system, it is about the things which um, you want to propagate and share with the audience, with the people, the readers who are reading to you. So, even the most abstract works, such as The System of Logic and his examination of Sir William Hamilton's philosophies, serve polemical purposes in the fight against the German or a priori school, otherwise called institutionism. So, on Mill's view, institutionism needs, or intuitionism needed to be defeated in the realms of logic. The kind of intuition which you have can be defeated in the realms of logic, mathematics, and philosophy of mind if its pernicious effects in social and political discourse were to be mitigated. In his writings, Mill argues for a number of controversial principles. He defends radical empiricism in logic and mathematics, suggesting that basic principles of logic and mathematics are generalizations from experience rather than known a priori. So, the principle of utility, that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness, was the centerpiece of his ethical philosophy. On liberty, all of you must have heard about on liberty. It puts forward the harm principle, that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. And then the next work which we are going to discuss now, which is also a very important work, which is the in the subjection. That is subjection of, yes. So in the subjection of women, he compares the so subjection of women, he compares the legal status of women to the status of slaves and argues for equality in marriage and under the law. So this is something which Mill argues for and which Mill talks about in his work Subjection, the Subjection of Women. Now, if you study feminism, and we have studied feminism in the lecture series titled Literary Theory, which is also there in the Bharti's channel, you can refer to it for your preparation for the paper on literary theory. There we have discussed in details and we have also referred to the subjection of women. However, today we will discuss it in a little more details because it kind of provides the base for understanding the idea of how the concept of equality for women and the idea of women empowerment took its birth. So he compares the legal status of women to the status of slaves and argues. So, just like the slaves who do not have the ability to question things, to ask things, similar is the status of women. So he compares the legal status of women to the status of slaves and argues for equality in marriage and under the law. And this term equality was earlier not existing, very much in the document, in the form of writing, in the form of some kind of active participation and interaction. And Mill actually brought it into discussion, which was later on taken up by various women writers. But it's very interesting that John Stuart Mill, even though he himself was not a lady, but he took up this question. So, On Liberty is one of Mill's most famous works and remains the one most read today. In this book, Mill expounds his concept of individual freedom within the context of his ideas on history and the state. So, on liberty depends on the idea that society progresses from lower to higher stages and that this progress culminates in the emergence of a system of representative democracy. So, emergence of what? Emergence of representative democracy. It is within the context of this form of government that Mill envisions the growth and development of liberty. So, his idea of liberty and how there can be uh, growth in liberty, what would be the way in which we can achieve it, all these things you get when you discuss about on liberty and you read on liberty. The key concept in On Liberty is the idea that liberty is essential to ensure subsequent progress both of the individual and society, particularly when society becomes more important than the state. So, this state of affairs would be attained in a representative democracy in which the opposition between the rulers and the ruled disappears, in that the rulers only represent the interests of the rule. So, such a democracy would make the liberty of the individual possible. Now, you have to understand if we are talking about the liberty of an individual and the state, these two things are not different. So, if we envision that this is the state we are living in and an individual who is living in there, if we have to talk about the liberty of an individual, then definitely it is going to be related to the individual of the state and the state to the individual. So, such a democracy would make the liberty of the individual possible, but it would not guarantee it. So, the key concept of on liberty is the idea that liberty is essential to ensure subsequent progress. And progress, by this, we do not mean the progress of any particular individual only. Rather, we are talking about the progress of the society at large and how that society becomes more important than the state. So, this state of affairs would be attained in a representative government. We have to remember what kind of government? In a representative government. And in which the opposition between the rulers and the ruled disappears, in that the rulers only represent the interest of the ruled. So such a democracy would make the liberty of the individual possible, but it would not guarantee it. So when society becomes free of the constraints of government, it begins to entrench the interests of a select and powerful few, which threatens individual liberty in a new way. So it begins to entrench the interests of a select and powerful few, which threatens individual liberty in a new way. The question of women's role and rights in society has been a hotly debated topic for centuries. The Victorian age of 19th century England is no exception. In Victorian England, women gradually gained more legal rights, like the right to divorce, but they were still inferior to men in education, political rights, and social status. So, today itself, when I was discussing with my students a very interesting chapter, which is by Muhammad Yunus, which is called Muhammad, or rather, it's by Farida Khan, and it's on Muhammad Yunus, which is Muhammad Yunus and Economics for Peace. There we see how this concept of Grameen Bank, the idea of microcredit system, actually empowered women from the rural areas to understand their economic freedom and to put across their right to question things around in the society. So similarly, in the Victorian age of the 19th century, England, it's no exception. So women gradually gained more legal rights, like the right to divorce, but they were still inferior to men in education, political rights, and social status. So many thinkers, politicians, activists, and writers, including John Stuart Mill, contributed to this debate on gender roles in the Victorian age, aptly named the women or the woman question. Now, as I was saying, that when we are discussing a topic, it is interrelated, though we are discussing it under the topic of non-fiction. But this concept of woman question, this concept of woman empowerment, this question of what led to women empowerment, all these things are interrelated. It is related to literary theory, it's related to the concept of feminism, it is related to the idea of or rather the kind of writing which was happening in the Victorian age, and how the writers who were writing during that age were influenced by these new things. So many thinkers, politicians, activists, and writers, including John Stuart Mill, contributed to this debate on gender roles in the Victorian age. And then, what is the woman question? It is this debate on gender roles, which is termed as the woman question. So, Mill was a British philosopher and writer who was fed up with women being treated as a subordinate and disempowered. So, in 1869, Mill published his book, and students, please take a note of this book, The Subjection of Women, which I have also referred earlier. The Subjection of Women, which analyzed women's status and advocated for women's equality in Victorian society. So in 1869, Mill published his book, The Subjection of Women, which analyzed women's status and advocated for women's equality in Victorian society. So in 1869, Mill published this book and advocated for women's equality in Victorian society. Now, according to Mill, custom, by which he means Victorian culture or society. So, custom is not something unique. All of us, each place, each region has its own customs, right? So, it is basically the customs and rituals of the Victorian age, which we are talking about, insists that a woman's primary duty is to please and serve others. And if you take a look around you, can you tell me, do you see anything else? How would you define women's role in and around you? What do you see women actually doing in and around you? What kind of role do they have? Yes, anybody would like to tell me? So, what is the role which a woman is identified with? Yes, you would like to use the chat box to write down the role of the women. I see some of you online, so you can just write and share the primary role which you feel a woman is identified with. Anybody can just write it down. So, how is a woman identified? Somewhere down the line, it is about the image of a caregiver, somebody who is there who epitomizes this concept of caregiver. But is it that the identity of a woman stop, identity of a particular woman stops there, or there are certain other things to it? And that is what Mill makes us think. That is what this discussion on Mill will make us think today, wherein we are thinking as to how it is John Stuart Mill who so many years back actually thought about these things, when all these things were very much naturalized and normalized, and it was believed that women are born to be subjugated. Women are born to please others. No questions related to economics, no questions related to spending, no questions relating to do something of their own. It's only about pleasing and serving others, and put her own desires on hold. That is, she is not going to talk about her own desires. It is as if it's a taboo. So it's more about pleasing and serving others, putting her own desires on hold. That means women were expected and taught to attract a suitable husband, and once married, to stay home, raise the children, submit to her husband, and attend to household affairs. So, this concept of female gender role was also referred to as the cult of domesticity, which was very much there during that time. And we cannot tell that we have actually progressed much. So Mill rejected all of this and instead argued that such custom kept women from reaching. Instead, Mill argued women should be granted what? Granted more political and legal rights, as well as given more social and economic opportunities. So, this concept of female gender role was also referred to as the cult of domesticity, and it rejected all of these. That is, Mill rejected all of this kind of expectations, and he argued that such custom kept women from reaching their full potential. Instead, Mill argued women should be granted more political and legal rights, as well as given more social and economic opportunities. So the subjection of women was written in 1861 and published in 1869. According to Mill himself, it was written in collaboration with his wife Harriet Taylor. She actually died a few years before Mill put their commonly held ideas about gender equality to paper. But in his own words, when two people have their thoughts and speculations completely in common, it is of little consequence in respect to the question of originality, which of them holds the pen. So, what do we mean by this line? So, when two people have their thoughts and speculations completely in common, it is the little consciousness. So, when two people have their thoughts and speculations completely in common, it is of little consequence in respect. It is of little consequence in respect to the question of originality, which of them holds the pen. So the essay then was a result of ideas the two had discussed extensively over the course of their long friendship and eventual marriage. So the essay, which essay are we talking about? The essay, The Subjection of Women, which you need to actually read in original to get an understanding of what we are talking about. And how does this play an important role in giving a base to the study of feminism in and around time? So the essay then was a result of ideas the two had discussed extensively over the course of their long friendship and eventual marriage. One of the most interesting tensions in Mill's The Subjection of Women is between his strong conjectures over ostensibly natural differences between men and women and his equally strong disavowal of men's capacity to know anything about women due to society disallowing women the liberty to express their nature or their true natures. So Mill doesn't spend much time trying to resolve these tensions, except perhaps with the several brief statements as to how doubt does not forbid conjecture. So, as we know from On Liberty, however, feeling any degree of certainty where absolute certainty is not possible requires an extremely assiduous critical process of checking one's opinions against opposing ones. It seems that one must assume that Mill's claims have already gone through this vigorous process. But then one wonders, on the ground of Mill's own principles, as to how any kind of certainty can be arrived at when there is so little information at all, since the half of the population that might know the best can't express themselves. So, the problem of expression, how would you go about it? So, with this, we come to the kind of uh, end of the discussion of the topics which we had taken up today. However, we have to kind of refer back to some of the important writers whom we have taken up. So you can make a list and you can actually prepare a list of these writers, their contribution in the field of nonfiction, and how they are important. Now, coming to the books which you need to refer to. So here I would say that getting an entire book on nonfiction will actually not do or give you the idea of entire study for nonfiction. Rather, I would tell you that the history of English literature books which are there with you, which are very famous, and you are using them. It can be any of the books which you are very comfortable. It can be Albert's book. However, in Edward Albert's book, you will get names, but the entire kind of understanding of all the topics or getting to know all the book writers, so everything you will not get over there. So what you can do is that there is the Selden's book, there are some other good book, David Dash's books are there, wherein you get thorough reference of the writers who are there and who kind of have contributed to the field of this study. So, number one, you will have to refer to these books and these writers. That is number one of yours. So, when you are talking about non-fiction works, each age, take them up, and in each age, the book, History of English Literature book, which you have, you can make a note of the non-fictional works. Number two is that you will have to do some study for the later age, the modern age, and the some of the ages which are not covered there. So make a list of that and prepare your short notes on that, so that if there is any question you are able to answer. And third, you can refer to this entire lecture series wherein we have discussed about the important works and their important contribution. So using these three methods, that is one, referring to the important history of English literature books which you are currently using for preparation for basic literature, British literature, then American literature, then Indian English literature. So, for each kind of literature and the kind of non-fiction which is written in that age, you can make a list of them. And then, number two, you can always refer to some authentic source in the internet for the ones which you do not get over there in the traditional book. And number three, you can refer to the lecture series wherein we have got 6 lectures, and in the very beginning we have actually discussed what is fiction, what is non-fiction, how is non-fiction different from fiction, what is the writing style in non-fiction, and who are the important writers. We have discussed Indian non or rather non-fiction from the history of English literature, we have discussed nonfiction from the aspect of American writers, their nonfiction. So, different aspects, different areas, different authors have already been discussed. Different examples of nonfiction have already been discussed. But then, for preparation of net set, you will have to keep on searching. You are a researcher. You have to remember, just like a researcher, you need to keep on putting across your points, at least the names, the dates, the age, who was the writer, and then when was it published, who were the characters, because you have to remember you are going to face an MCQ examination. In MCQ examination, it's not your writing flair which is going to be judged, it's not your writing quality which is going to be judged. What is going to be judged is your ability to remember the facts and produce them correctly during the examination. So whenever you are appearing for an examination, try to have a very cool mind, gather yourself, and fact based reading, trying to be updated about the facts. Something new is happening in this field, some new somebody's awarded a prize, who is that, what is the name, what is the name of the work, what is it about. Try to jot down those points and read out. So this is the last lecture of the net set English literature series from my side. So hope to meet you in some other series sometime later. Thank you so much to Bati for giving me this opportunity to interact with students over these months, because we started around May and June, and then today it's September. It was a long association. Thank you for this. So anybody who would like to contact with me even after this is my uh, details. And yes, Krishna's Canvas is my channel through which you can actually connect with me even after the lecture series. So with this, I would like to stop. If you have any questions, then please use the chat box to put it. If not, then as I shared my details with you, you can actually connect with me later on when this series is over as well, for any guidance, any suggestion which you would like to discuss with me. So thank you so much, all of you. My phone number and my details is already given in the description. You can connect with me through that as well. So thank you. Wish you all the best. It was wonderful teaching on you.
you